Today on the Wrestling Roundtable, remembering Chris Kanyon, homosexual stereotypes in wrestling, and the career of Shawn Michaels. Welcome to the Wrestling Roundtable. It's been a while since we've been on the internet in video form, but we have been on in audio form. Since we've been on the internet last discussing things here on the panel, we've started Wrestling Roundtable Radio, and you can check that out on blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. We are on every Tuesday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we want to hear your thoughts. You can call 347-857-4647 and interact directly with the roundtable because this is your show too. We've been saying it forever. Now we can go beyond text and columns and have some more direct interaction with you. We want to hear your thoughts. And while we're plugging things, we want to remind you to get the Pro Wrestling Respect DVD, Pro Wrestling 1 Inaugural. We shot that back in January at Burlington, New Jersey. We're sponsoring Pro Wrestling Respect here at the Wrestling Roundtable, and we hope you support that and the show by picking it up at our shop at WrestlingRoundtable.com or ProWrestlingRespect.com. And today, one of the topics we're going to talk about is an issue that it seems we touch upon every year in our season's history so far. In our first season, we did prejudice in pro wrestling, specifically racial prejudice. The second season, we talked about women in wrestling and a lot of the stereotypes they face. Now we're going to talk about homosexuals in wrestling because I think it relates obviously directly to the recent unfortunate suicide death of Chris Kanyon. And now talking about gays in wrestling, I know we're opening ourselves up, bad choice of words, to a lot of jokes and whatnot, but I like these issues that do relate to the bigger world beyond the bubble of wrestling. So I'm hoping to do that now. And before we get down to business, let's introduce the panel. Sitting to my right, which is your left, is Chris Harris first, fan of 18 years and an audio-video technician. And to my right, as well as your left, is Jay Oletto, fan of 23 years. He's a Jersey Shore amusement manager. Myself, I'm the host of the Roundtable, Eric Santamaria. Been working in wrestling way too long, a little over 5.5 years, doing a lot of different jobs, having a lot of different hats, producer, videographer, now ring announcer. And sitting to my left, which is your right, is Rodney LeConte, fan of 21 years, director of the upcoming documentary, The Grappling Kings. We were just shooting for that in Essex County College in Newark, New Jersey, shooting the Naga tournament. We've hit all the major tournaments in the area, so I think it's going to be a really good documentary, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to this conversation because pretty much almost since professional wrestling has started taking form in the way that it is now, in the mid-50s or so, the first star that we always hear about was just inducted in WWE's Hall of Fame, Gorgeous George. And since then, there's been a lot of stereotypes portrayed, at least cartoon characters of gays in wrestling. Adrian Street, Adrian Adonis, Goldust, Lenny and Lodi, Billy and Chuck, Rico, now Orlando Jordan, Tugboat. There's been a lot of, what? He's a sailor, right? Well, his original name was Tug Job. People don't know that. But seriously, we're making the jokes already. But this is a group, I guess you could call it a minority, that we've always talked about how other groups and minorities are always portrayed to the lowest common denominator in wrestling, whether it's the Mexicools or the women or whatnot. Why do you think gays are always portrayed as cartoon characters?
It might be out of fear and misunderstanding. You have a lot of old guys in the back. They don't really want to hear about, this bleeding heart liberals, with their, gay rights and to them it's a joke. Like everything else, like everything with racism, with women, everything to them is just a joke.
So could it be a form of homophobia?
I believe so. Like in any sports or military, there's a male camaraderie, and for the most part, they're straight males.
Especially for a frat club that wrestling is, the boys club. That
Absolutely.
You look at it also, you're talking about guys that go out there in little trunks, oiled up, rolling around on a mat. They want to try and be as manly as possible when they're not doing that.
There have always been flamboyant characters in wrestling since Gorgeous George, like you said. And does that have anything to do with their sexuality? I don't know. You just don't know because it's a character that they play. So there's a misunderstanding and a misconception there with a lot of fans and wrestlers in general.
I think these cartoon characters such as Gorgeous George and Goldust, they really just get under fans' skin because they're taking their character, their gay character, and throwing it in the fans' faces. And not everyone is accepting of homosexual characters. I think if they really took a character such as Goldust, and you have to do a cartoonish because with these gay stereotypes, you're walking on eggshells, and with wrestling, they get bad rap with everything. I think if they did it in a smart way, because I still believe in wrestling, if they put the right marketing strategy and had a feud with the right antagonist, they could have an openly gay character that people would get behind.
Well, that's a question that's very interesting and one I've put a lot of thought into, and we'll get to that later. But you see, I believe most of the time, like these gimmicks we've mentioned now, except now maybe perhaps Orlando Jordan, because obviously that's based on his real life bisexuality. I think everyone else so far, like the Adrian Adonises and Goldust, they haven't been really that way. But there are some wrestlers that are the exception to the gay rule, so to speak. Like we just saw at the Big Bang, Cassandro El Exotico, who happens to actually be a real Exotico in Mexico. I think he actually had surgery and whatnot. But he was saying there's been Exoticos in Mexican wrestling since the 50s. And that's just Mexico. You go to Japan and you look at pretty much every Japanese wrestler ever. All right, I'm joking. Definitely every DDT wrestler ever. But I don't think a lot of these wrestlers are usually like that. However, there are some homosexuals in wrestling. You look at someone like Pat Patterson, who's pretty much an open homosexual, and he's been employed for decades, and aside from that scandal in about 92 or so, has been pretty much respected the entire time, and no one seems to have a problem with it. So I wanted to bring up Kanyon coming out in 2006. He got fired in 2004 by WWE, and he claims that it was because of his homosexuality. He had just come out then. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of homosexuals attracted to wrestling because of what it is. Like you said, half-naked guys that are juiced up, oiled up, and rolling around on top of each other. So that's going to attract some people, but I think a lot of them are in the closet like Kanyon was for a long time. You think there's closeted gay wrestlers now?
Without a doubt. I think in every sport, nobody's going to want to come out until their career is over. There was a basketball player, I believe, last year that came out after it ended. There was a rumor a few years ago that someone on the Mets was gay. Nobody wants to come out when you're on the team, but afterwards you'll probably hear these stories. A guy like Kanyon, after he's fired, his career is winding down, he comes out to the fans.
But do you think, like he claimed, because I don't personally believe it, but do you think that there's anything to what he claimed that he got fired because he came out?
I don't think so. I mean, there always could be, and you never know in sports and male camaraderie areas like this. But I really don't think so, because all the WCW guys ended up getting fired anyway. Every single one got released pretty much except Chavo. Chavo's still there. And I think it was just a matter of time before Kanyon got released anyway.
I agree with you, Jay. I think it was more of that he came from WCW than his homosexuality, because this is a sport, an industry where it's driven by the alpha male. People want to see the Batmans, the Supermans, the Hogans, the Bret Harts, the really strong male character.
And straight males make up most of the audience, I would think.
Exactly. Yeah. And, they want to target to the female audience as well. Mm-hmm. If an openly gay wrestler was out, I don't know if they'd have that same fan base.
I think an openly female character, an openly gay female character does a lot.
Well, they really skirted the line with Mickie James a few years ago.
They did. And with HLA, remember Hot Lesbian Action.
And look how many male fans that really got behind Mickie.
They did.
Everyone got behind her at WrestleMania.
Yeah. Well, of course, because let's call it what it is. Whenever there's lesbian angles or gimmicks in wrestling, it's usually not what real lesbians look like.
It wasn't exactly Nicole Bass and Chyna out there.
Right. Well, even Chyna was straight and looked, after surgery, a lot more feminine than the usual bull dyke that I think real lesbians would be. So I think it's more of a porn version of what lesbians are.
It's fantasy. That's
right.
All.
But they also did that storyline in a way that people could relate to what Mickie was going through.
Mm-hmm. They certainly did. But going back to Kanyon's firing, he came out a couple years later trying to get back in the headlines, trying to make a name for himself again. He thought, well, I'm going to be the first openly gay wrestler. And it never really took off. Do you think that's because people didn't care? And is that a good thing?
I would like to think so, but no. Knowing this country, no, it's not. I hate to say this, because as wrestling fans, we don't like to be stereotyped, but there are a lot of people that are not open to this. I think it was at the point where he was irrelevant. He was irrelevant, basically. He had been gone from WWE for 2 years. He made, one appearance in TNA at that point as Chris K. He wasn't in the spotlight anymore. It seems like a desperate grab for attention to maybe get back into one of these companies, and it didn't work how he planned.
I agree. I mean, Kanyon, he was a great wrestler. Everybody knows what he did in the ring and how he could do it. But I don't think him coming out as the first openly gay professional wrestler has anything to do with him getting back in the ring with the WWE or TNA. He should have tried to maybe work harder and become a better wrestler, get in better shape or something like that.
At that point, he was irrelevant. He's been out of the spotlight for a long time. Even in WCW, a lot of people still didn't really know Kanyon the way they knew a lot of the other WCW wrestlers. And I think him coming out gay was just a ploy on his part to try to get back in the headlines, to try to be talked about, and it failed because it was just bad timing.
Before we move on to specifically about Kanyon, one last question. You mentioned it earlier. Do you think there could ever be a situation in 2010 where I think people are a lot more accepting? And when Kanyon came out, I think it didn't make a lot of difference to a lot of people, and I think that's probably a good thing. He would have probably been better served just trying to get back into a company in general instead of relying on the coming out of the closet as a crutch. But would there ever be a situation now in 2010 where there could be a gay world champion, let's say?
I don't know. It's very possible because right now, with the way they're keeping that kind of stuff under the rug and guys aren't really out of the closet, who knows? AJ Styles could be gay, for all you know. He's married, but who knows? You just don't know.
Well, he's also walking around with women as a gimmick, so why not go in the other direction?
Still, you don't know.
I really don't think so. This is a point in our country where gays are fighting for rights to get married. There's a lot of controversy.
And losing.
There's a lot going on where it doesn't seem likely right now. You have the whole thing going on with the military, don't ask, don't tell. There's too much, I think, going on right now. Maybe in a few years. I would hope to see it, just like I would hope them to be able to get married. It's not fair.
Absolutely. I think absolutely could happen. It could have happened in 1996 with Goldust if they really went through with it. Given the right situation, the right character, they could make a world champion out of anybody.
I think so as well, but I don't think it can be a cartoon. I don't think Orlando Jordan's going to get any closer to the world title by spraying himself with white liquid and whatnot. I find it hilarious when, like, Goldust was getting attention from gay groups. And much like a few years later, Billy and Chuck Glad came out and was happy they were going to do a wedding. They look like idiots because they don't realize wrestling makes a joke about everything. But I think the situation would be much like the cake. It has to be subtle, people. I would just like a guy who's already over, if they're going to do that, to just come out and say, I'm gay. And that's it.
What if a world champion, someone right now who had the belt already, you've never seen him with a woman before, just came out and said it? What would the reaction be?
And that's it. He can't be prancing around in pink tutus the next week either. Just 1-2-word sentence, and then that's it.
I think it's automatic heat. He gets heat automatically.
So you think Cena? If Cena came out of Raw,
I think fans would. Cena is already
shocked.
He's already got that 50-50 fan base as it is. I think it would be the fans would completely turn against him.
But what if it was someone like Jeff Hardy, who's pretty much universally loved? I think people would like him no matter what.
At this point, I don't think it would happen.
It's really all about how they do it. Mm-hmm. It's all about the delivery.
Well, I was hoping that it was going to be Heidenreich and Snitsky when they were doing those pretty erotic skits a couple years ago, because I think a good way to pull this off is if they had the equivalent of, let's say, the Road Warriors, because really, who's going to mess with them if Paul Ellering comes out and says, J.J. Dillon, I have an announcement. Very special words from Hawk and Animal. And Animal says, that's right, we're gay. These two big beefed up monsters, and that's all they ever say about it. Tell them, Hawk. Yeah, we're gay. You got a problem with that? That's it. I don't think anybody would mess with those guys if they had said those words.
Absolutely not.
But moving on to Chris Kanyon, we're going to take a break, come back, talk more about the career of Chris Kanyon when we come back.
You know, they say one in five people is gay. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, 1 in 5, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm wondering now how many jokes have been made under this video as people go through it, but I wanted to preface this by saying I met Kanyon about a year and a half ago or sometime last year, and him being gay never entered my mind. So maybe I just think of it differently than other people. I've known a lot of gay people in my life. I've interacted with them or been friendly with them, and there's lots of different types. So there's a lot of variety in that minority or group as there is in others. So I tend to think of people more as people and what they are. So hopefully people will do the same for that. And when it comes to Chris Kanyon, yeah, we wanted to cover his career and his life, because when I was reading about his suicide, it was really depressing. Someone who everyone respected. You saw how Twitter lit up with the wrestlers after he committed suicide and let everybody know how much he helped them out or helped out others. He seemed to be a pretty selfless person, and Jim Mitchell was saying how terrible it was for him because he was almost too good of a person to be in wrestling. He had too much integrity, and maybe that's what also led to that bipolar and manic depressive situation. And it was very sad to see someone like that who was so talented end up in a situation like that when he could have had a good life outside of wrestling if he really dedicated himself and could get over his mental issues. This isn't necessarily going to be matches or moments or specific incidences. Let's just go over our memories of Kanyon. And as I was talking to him at that convention the other year, more and more instances I was like, oh yeah, I like that too, and I like that too. And we had a good conversation. And one of the first things, obviously, for the mainstream is when he showed up in WCW as Mortis.
Oh, Men in Work, I thought. He was in this tag team, and they were construction workers, and he would like always mess it up. He'd be like measuring something, and the guy would get pinned. It was pretty terrible, but it's pretty funny to think about now.
Sort of like the Mortis gimmick and the whole Mortal Kombat theme there. Now, he's kind of the precedent of the MMA zombie like Undertaker is now, where you watch Mortis back and he's starting off with the stance and they're doing martial arts sort of stuff. I love the music. It was a cool look. One thing that you brought up off camera that I mentioned to him as well is how well he sold for some of these guys. When they started bringing in Ernest Miller, the karate master, and he would throw those awesome spin kicks, Kanyon would sell it with a big bump on his neck. He would make the cat look a lot better than a lot of people thought he was.
During his who's better than Kanyon phase, he would come out, who's better than Kanyon? Or, everybody. And one week he came out and said, who's not better than Kanyon? Everybody. He's like, ha, I got you.
Obviously, when it comes to catchphrases, people think of, that's the bottom line, and train say your prayers, and if you smell it, the rock is cooking. But that one has to be up there, I would think.
Yeah.
It would at least make the list, because Kanyon may not be remembered for a lot of things in terms of star power like Rock or Austin, but that catchphrase is something everyone got into and everyone remembered.
Yeah, Who Better Than Kanyon was great. I really loved how he had a lot of different offensive moves. He was the innovator of offense, they called him for a while in WCW. And he had a lot of great gimmicks. Positively Page, Who Better Than Kanyon, like we just said. And he also had Mortis and the Jersey Triad. He wasn't actually from Jersey, believe it or not, but he got the gimmick over well with Bam Bam and DDP.
CCK also.
Right.
Champagne
Kanyon.
Well, Champagne didn't last too long. Once he lost the mask and he started getting involved with Raven's Flock, right around the time Raven's Flock disintegrated after the DDP feud, he was hanging out with Raven, and they started doing those skits where Raven and Kanyon were hanging out. Oh my God, I didn't know you were rich. And Raven ended up being the spoiled rich kid instead of the dirty grungy kid. And I enjoyed a lot of those skits, like when they would go shopping and try on clothes and drive the car and blah, blah, blah. I think it was a good way to keep them on TV, so to speak. And I'll never forget, you know how as a wrestling fan, sound bites stick in your head? I'll never forget when Sandman made his debut. Before Hardcore Hack, I think he was just Jim or Hack, and he showed up at the pool that Raven was having Kanyon clean, and he's sifting the pool, and Hack goes, "Hello, Kanyon," and he slaps him on the back, and Kanyon took the most ridiculous oversold dive into the pool. A lot of good comedy in those skits. What are some of your memories of Kanyon?
Right around that time when he was with DDP, and in comes Goldberg, and the first person he spears is Kanyon, and Kanyon sold it like a monster, flipping back, landing on his neck, completely making the spear look like the devastated move, which it once was. Not now it is now, but like you guys were saying before, he just took moves and he made the guy look good, and that just shows how selfless he is.
The Jersey Triad, as Jay mentioned, and unfortunately it was the WCW equivalent of the Triple Threat, which Bam Bam Bigelow was also involved in. And the reason I say unfortunately is now you look at it, there's only one member left from each one of them. Yeah. Bigelow and Candido, and now Kanyon and Bigelow. very unfortunate. But I really liked the chemistry that Bigelow, DDP, and Kanyon had. That worked really well as a three-man faction in the summer of '99. But that also segued into the DDP feud once they split up. And you mentioned Positively Kanyon as well. I loved Positively Kanyon because I thought it was brilliant in numerous levels. For one, DDP was off recovering from injury, I believe, and it was several months that it went on, right around the time that his book was coming out, and this kept DDP relevant on TV. So Kanyon goofing on him with the wig and the book, it really kept DDP relevant as well as putting heat on Kanyon. And then the skits, when he would diamond cut everybody. I love when wrestling breaks a convention. For instance, they always cut to the outside shot of, we're here at the Arco Arena, and all of a sudden you see in the distance someone walking, and like these little ant figures, Kanyon ran up and diamond cut someone. They had the skit where he diamond cut someone on the ring crew when they were setting up the ring. Mike Sanders, when he first debuted and he got beat up 3 times in the back, once by Daphne, once by the Young Dragons, I believe, and then the last time was Positively Kanyon. I thought it was really good, and I don't really think they blew it off. Once DDP came back, they did have a couple matches, but not a real big one. But I thought it was a brilliant setup.
There's a house show, a WWF house show in 2006, where this is just after Kanyon came out of the closet and DX was in the ring. Triple H and Shawn Michaels, it was the first reunion. And Kanyon was in the first row, and he held up a sign to Shawn Michaels and Triple H, something along the lines of, Shawn Michaels, please pray for my gay ass, something like that. And he got thrown out of the arena by security, and Triple H got on the microphone and said, "Who let Kanyon in the building?" I guess that was a way of him trying to get noticed towards the end.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Shawn Michaels because when we come back, we're going to talk about the career of Shawn Michaels.